You'll never amount to anything, said the stepfather. Now she's standing at his door as his new boss. The Hartfield manufacturing plant sat at the edge of town like a tired old man who'd forgotten how to stand straight. Elena Vasquez parked her rental car in the visitor spot and sat there for a long moment, watching the November wind push dead leaves across the cracked asphalt. 22 years since she'd been back. 22 years since she'd walked out of this town with nothing but a backpack and the sound of his voice ringing in her ears. You'll never amount to anything. You're just like your mother, all dreams and no spine. She was 40 now, chief operations officer of Meridian Industries. She wore silk blouses that cost more than the rent on the apartment she'd grown up in, and she'd learned to walk into boardrooms full of men twice her age without her hands shaking. But sitting here, looking at the rust stains bleeding down the walls of Building C, she felt 15 again. Small, invisible, wrong. The corporate restructuring had been impersonal, handled entirely through lawyers and regional managers. When Meridian acquired Hartfield 6 months ago, Elena hadn't known. When they'd assigned her to assess the struggling plant for potential closure, she hadn't asked questions. It wasn't until she'd reviewed the employee roster last week that she'd seen his name. Frank Dunmore, floor supervisor, Building C, her stepfather. The man who'd married her mother when Elena was 8 and left her feeling like a guest in her own home for the next 7 years. She gathered her leather portfolio and stepped out of the car. The cold hit her face like a slap, and she welcomed it. She needed to feel something other than this strange, hollowing dread. The administrative building smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long, an industrial cleaning solution. A young woman at the front desk looked up with tired eyes and pointed her toward the conference room where the department heads were waiting. Elena was halfway down the corridor when she heard the small voice. "Excuse me? Are you lost?" She turned. A little girl, 6, maybe 7, sat on a plastic chair outside one of the offices. She had a coloring book open on her lap and a red crayon clutched in her fist. Her hair was pulled into 2 uneven braids and she wore a puffy jacket that was slightly too big, the sleeves pushed up to free her small hands. "No," Elena said, then softened her voice. Corporate mode had no place in conversations with children. "No, I'm not lost. I'm here for a meeting." The girl nodded seriously. "My grandpa has meetings sometimes. He says they're boring but important." She tilted her head, studying Elena with the unguarded curiosity that only children possess. "You look sad." Elena blinked. "I do?" "Uh-huh. Your eyes do." The girl held up her coloring book. "Do you want to color? Coloring makes me feel better when I'm sad. I'm doing a butterfly. You could do the flowers." There was something about the offer, so simple, so freely given, that made Elena's throat tighten unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had seen past her polished exterior and just offered her something soft? "That's very kind of you," Elena said, "but I really do have to get to my meeting. What's your name?" Lily Dunmore." The girl smiled, revealing a gap where her front tooth used to be. "I'm waiting for my grandpa. He's the boss of the whole building, you know. Building C. He's really important." The floor seemed to shift beneath Elena's feet. She gripped her portfolio tighter. "He fixes things when they break," Lily continued, oblivious to the earthquake she'd just caused in Elena's chest. "And he lets me help sometimes. He says I have good hands for small work," as she held up her fingers, wiggling them proudly. "He's teaching me to be patient. He says patience is the most important thing." Elena couldn't speak. She was looking at this child, this bright, sweet, gap-toothed child, and trying to reconcile her with the man she remembered, the man who'd had no patience for anything, who'd looked at her report cards and found only the one B among the A's, who'd watched her practice violin for hours and told her she was wasting time on foolishness, who'd made her feel every single day that she was not enough and would never be enough. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, her small brow furrowing with concern. "You look like you might cry. It's okay to cry. Grandpa says crying is just the feelings that got too big for your insides." He said that?" "Uh-huh. When Grandma went to heaven, he cried a lot. I didn't know grandpas could cry before that." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, as if sharing a secret. "I hold his hand when he gets sad. That helps too." Elena realized she was pressing her palm against her chest, as if trying to hold something in. "Lily, how long have you lived with your grandpa?" "Since I was 4. That's when Mommy got sick and went to heaven too." Lily said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when they've had to make peace with things too heavy for their years. "Grandpa takes care of me now. He makes me pancakes on Saturdays and reads me stories every night. even when he's tired. She paused, seeming to consider something. He's tired a lot, but he says I make him less tired. I'm his sunshine girl. Elena thought about the file on her laptop, the efficiency reports, the recommendation she'd been prepared to make, to close Building C, eliminate 47 positions, offer early retirement packages to anyone over 60, clean, corporate, impersonal. She thought about Frank Dunmore losing his job, losing his insurance, trying to raise this little girl on a pension. Lily? A familiar voice, deeper now, roughened by age. Who are you talking to, sweetheart? Elena turned slowly. He was older. Of course he was. 22 years would do that to anyone. His hair had gone entirely gray, and he walked with a slight hitch in his step that hadn't been there before. But she would have known him anywhere. The same square jaw, the same way of standing with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing against a wind only he could feel. He stopped when he saw her, the color drained from his face. Elena? Hello, Frank. Lily bounced in her seat. You know each other? Grandpa, she was sad, so I told her about coloring and being patient and... Lily, honey? Frank's voice was strange, caught somewhere between wonder and fear. Why don't you go ask Mrs. Patterson if she has any of those cookies she keeps in her desk? But Grandpa, please, sunshine. The little girl looked between them, clearly sensing the weight in the air, but she gathered her crayons and slipped off the chair. She paused beside Elena on her way past. It was nice to meet you, she said solemnly. I hope your meeting isn't too boring. And then she was gone, her small footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Elena standing 3 feet away from the man who had shaped her childhood in all the wrong ways. The silence stretched like taffy. You're the one from corporate, Frank finally said. The one making the decision about Building C. It wasn't a question. Small towns had small secrets. Yes. He nodded slowly, his jaw working. I figured, when they said someone was coming, I didn't think... Neither did I. More silence. Elena watched him struggle, watched emotions pass across his face like weather systems, shame, fear, something that might have been hope trying to push through. She's a good kid, Elena said finally. Lily? Frank's whole body seemed to soften at the name. She's everything. After Margaret died, and then Rachel... He stopped, cleared his throat. She's the only good thing I have left. She said you're teaching her patience. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Trying to. Lord knows I wasn't good at that, before. He met her eyes then, really met them, and she saw something she'd never seen in him before. Remorse, raw and undefended. Elena, the things I said to you, the way I was, I've thought about it every day since you left. Every single day. Have you? The words came out flatter than she intended. I was angry at the world back then, at my life, at myself, and I took it out on you because you were there and you were young and you couldn't fight back. It was wrong. It was... He shook his head, blinking rapidly. There's no excuse. None. But I want you to know that I know. I know what I did, and I know it was unforgivable. Elena had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In her fantasies, she was always triumphant, cold and powerful and untouchable. She would make him see what she'd become, make him understand that she'd succeeded despite him, that his words had meant nothing. But standing here now, looking at this tired old man who made pancakes on Saturdays and cried when his granddaughter held his hand, she found that the triumph tasted like ash. It wasn't unforgivable, she heard herself say. It was wrong and it hurt, and it took me years to stop hearing your voice in my head every time I tried something new. But it wasn't unforgivable. Frank's eyes were wet. He wiped at them roughly with the back of his hand. I went to therapy, Elena continued. Eventually, and I realized that the voice in my head wasn't even really yours anymore. It was mine. I'd made it mine. I'd used it to push myself until I was the best at everything I did. I built my whole career on proving you wrong. She paused. And I was so busy proving you wrong that I forgot to ask myself if I was happy. Are you? His voice was barely a whisper. Happy? She thought about her apartment in Chicago, the one with the view of the lake that she never had time to look at, the gym membership she used at 5 a.m. because there was no one waiting for her at home, the awards on her shelf that nobody visited to admire. I'm working on it. The conference room could wait. The efficiency reports and corporate recommendations could wait. Elena found herself walking toward the plastic chair where Lily had been sitting, lowering herself into it like someone much older than 40. Frank hesitated, then sat in the chair beside her. They stayed like that for a long moment, side by side, not quite touching. Through the window at the end of the hall, Elena could see the first snowflakes of the season beginning to fall. "Tell me about her," Elena said. "Tell me about Lily. Tell me about the last 22 years. Tell me everything I missed." And slowly, haltingly, like a man learning to speak again after years of silence, Frank Dunmore began to talk. He told her about Margaret, who had been the one to finally show him how to be soft. About Rachel, his daughter from his first marriage, who had struggled with addiction and emerged victorious only to be taken by cancer at 31. About the day Lily was placed in his arms and how holding her had felt like a second chance at becoming human. He told her about the nights he couldn't sleep, tormented by memories of the people he'd hurt. About the letter he'd written her 7 years ago, the one he'd never sent because he hadn't known where she was, and because he wasn't sure he deserved a response anyway. "I still have it," he said. "At home, in my desk drawer. I've rewritten it probably 50 times. "Maybe you could give it to me," Elena said. "Someday, when you're ready." "Maybe?" Lily came bouncing back down the hallway, clutching a chocolate chip cookie in each hand. "Mrs. Patterson gave me 2, she announced triumphantly. Then, seeing them sitting together, her face lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy. "You're friends now. I knew it. I knew coloring would help." Elena laughed, a real laugh, surprising herself. "You were right, Lily. You're very wise." "I know." The girl plopped, down cross-legged on the floor in front of them. "Do you want to come to dinner? Grandpa makes really good spaghetti. Well, sometimes it's kind of mushy, but I like mushy spaghetti." Elena looked at Frank. He was watching his granddaughter with such tenderness, such unguarded love, that she could hardly reconcile him with the hard man from her memories. "I'd like that," she said, "if it's okay with your grandpa." Frank's voice was thick when he spoke. "It's more than okay." The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the parking lot in white, making everything look soft and new. Elena thought about the report she'd have to write, about Building C and 47 jobs and this tired old plant at the edge of a tired old town. She thought about the retirement package that Frank Dunmore was probably praying for and dreading in equal measure. She thought about the consulting firm Meridian had hired last year to identify operational improvements that could make struggling acquisitions viable. "Frank," she said, "I'm going to need a tour of Building C tomorrow. I want to see everything, what's working, what isn't, where the inefficiencies are, and I want you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly, something like hope dawning in his eyes. "I can't make any promises," she added, "but I'd like to try to find another way." Lily tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Are you coming to dinner tomorrow too?" Elena looked down at this small girl who had seen a stranger's sadness and offered her a crayon, who had taught her grandfather about patience and crying and holding hands, who had, in the space of 10 minutes, cracked open something in Elena that she'd kept locked away for 22 years. "If you'll have me," she said. "Of course we will." Lily reached up and patted Elena's hand with cookie crumb fingers. "You're not a stranger anymore. You're our friend." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the cracked asphalt and the rust stains and all the old wounds that time had left behind. And inside the administrative building of a struggling manufacturing plant, 3 people sat together, an old man, a little girl, and the woman who had come home expecting to find an enemy and discovered instead the beginning of something like family. Some circles take 22 years to complete. Some wounds need generations to heal, but sometimes all it takes is a child with a coloring book, asking the right question at the right moment to remind us that we were never meant to carry our hurt alone. The snow kept falling, and somewhere in that quiet hallway, the past finally learned how to rest.